Welcome to Bound by Books. I am one of your hosts, writer Danielle Bannister, and I'm joined today by fellow writer Marianne Morea. Welcome, Marianne.
Hi. Hey, Danielle. Nice to see you again. It's been a minute.
It has been a minute.
Uh,
It has been a minute.
yeah, we've all been busy and traveling and doing our
Well, some of us
summertime
have been
thing.
traveling. I have not been traveling. I've not been going anywhere. So I'm jealous of
Yeah,
you and Tina who have been on vacation and being able to travel and go to
yeah,
places far and wide. I have been on my
yeah,
couch.
yeah.
So
Well, but you started a new job,
I'm
and I'm
I'm
jealous about
traveling
that.
in my
So,
mind. That's what I'm doing. I'm
yes.
traveling in my mind in my fiction writing. So
Hey, girly.
today's topic is keeping track of story details. It's a pesky little problem that we authors have to deal with, and there are lots of ways that you can sort of keep track. And so you and I are just going to kind of talk about what we do. It's not the be all end all way. This is just methods we use, right? So
Yes.
before we sort of dive in too much, I guess I want to ask you sort of what I mean, I know, but what genres do you write in so that listeners, watchers might have a sense of what sort of details you might be having to try to keep track of?
I write paranormal romance, paranormal romantic suspense, urban fantasy, paranormal women's fiction, and paranormal cozy mysteries. And you know that the operative word in all of those sentences is paranormal.
Right. So
So
that's going to be some
it's a big
some
old umbrella.
some details that say maybe a contemporary romance writer like myself might not have to keep track of. You're going to be having to keep track of a lot of, world building details, what things look like, because they're probably not necessarily going to be what a contemporary environment might look like. So you
No,
might have to pay closer attention to some of that.
yes, yes, in anybody who writes in fantasy, whether under the fantasy umbrella,
Yeah.
which incorporates the paranormal, um, there's a lot of world rules that you have to decide ahead of time. This is where being a pantster can kind of bite you in the pants,
Oh, for sure. For sure.
the part of the pants you
That
sit on.
that
So
whole piece of the world building and keeping track of stuff is one of the reasons I don't. I mean, I have written paranormal before and I have written fantasy before, and that has been the hardest part is keeping track of those details. It makes my head hurt. So,
yeah, yep, yep, yep.
my mad props to
It's
anybody who can do it. It's not within my realm of record keeping. So, I guess my first question to you, now that we sort of have a grasp of what details we're hanging on to, do you keep a digital copy of information, or do you keep a physical copy? Do you use like a whiteboard? Like, what do you use? Or maybe you don't use
all of the
anything at
above.
all. I'm making an
All
assumption here. You use it all.
all of the above. I have next to my desk. I would turn the
We
monitor
believe
around,
you.
but I'm afraid
We
I
don't
would
want the details.
disconnect myself.
Well, we also don't want the details of whatever you've written there. There might be some spoilers
Yeah.
there on that
I
content. So
have I have a whiteboard that I use and I jot stuff down. I have a myriad of all different kinds of notebooks, shapes and sizes, ring bound, spiral bound.
yeah.
The old fashioned ones we used to use in school with the polka dots, not the polka dots, the
Yeah, the
speckles on the front.
composition
What are they
notebooks.
called?
Yeah. Composition notebooks. Yeah.
Composition notebooks.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also have in the past had my reader group go ahead and for extra points and little perks and fun stuff, put together a digital Bible, for me about each of the characters and
That's
what
awesome.
uh, their physical and personality traits were.
Right.
So,
Right.
I haven't done it in a while. It needs to be updated. So, if any of my reader group is listening and you
It's
want to
a
volunteer for
never
some extra fun stuff,
ending
hit me up.
battle. Yeah. See, I
What
probably
about
need
you?
to be I need to probably be a little bit better with digital upkeep. I don't have a whiteboard. I don't really have space for it. I'd love to have like a big, huge whiteboard, but I don't really have a space for that. Maybe once the kids move out and I take over, one of their bedrooms, I can have that big, huge whiteboard and write down all the ideas. But for now, I'm like, it's just old school, planner that has, little tabs in it. It'll have,
Yep.
my character sheets and,
Oh,
the
oh,
basic information about what do they look like, and, what's their name, what's their age, what's their flaw that keeps haunting them
yeah.
and keeps coming back, what's their Myers-Briggs, are they an introvert? Are they an extrovert? Are they, all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
their sign? Because that can be some of your personality right there. You got a stubborn Taurus, or do so
Sounds
sometimes
like a
that,
pickup line with dust on it.
yeah, but it's
Which
it's one of those
side,
things that
baby?
sort of helps me figure out, character stuff. And then of
Yeah.
course I've
Yeah.
I've got within there all kinds of goodies. So these are like basically my book Bibles, for lack of a better
Yes.
word, that I have
Yes.
for
Well,
every book that I write. I've
book
got these are
Bible
the
is a
current
good
ones.
way of of explaining it,
Yeah, it
because
just
it's
has it
something
all
that
there.
every author needs to have, because if you don't, especially if you're planning to write a series or if you're doing an offshoot of any kind whatsoever, um, you're
Those
going to want to go back
details.
and you're going to want to reference it,
Yeah, they're gonna
especially if
hit
it's been a
you.
minute.
Yeah, you're gonna be writing and be like, wait, what color eyes did I give them? Or
Yeah.
how, did I give them? Did I kill off their parents? Did I? Do they
Yeah.
have siblings? You're gonna
Seriously.
forget, especially if you write a lot of books. You're gonna forget.
I gotta tell you, I just ran into it when I was writing Where'd You Get That Keeper? Because I wrote Jeepers Reapers last summer. And my life has just been topsy-turvy and crazy with moving and everything else that went along with my crazy life. And I actually did not have a Bible written for that book. I
It
had to go
hurts.
back and actually take one of my own paperbacks and skim it and take notes
Yeah.
for myself,
Oh, I've had to do it too, and it
and
cursed myself. Like, why didn't you write this down? We think we're gonna remember it. Like, we wrote the book. Of course we're gonna remember these. No, no, we're
no,
not. And it's
no.
weird because if you're reading a book, I can probably remember the details of the book that I've read that I didn't write. Like, oh yeah, they had blonde hair, and but my own stuff,
Character names, even
character
character names.
names. Oh my god, I cannot remember character names. They're the worst. And that's the worst part of writing for me, is coming up with characters, because I can't remember who I've used before, who
Oh,
I
names.
haven't.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
hate it. I hate it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
So
that also hit me with because I in my book Taste Me, I have he's a oh he was a shifter, a wolf shifter that actually was turned into a vampire at his bachelor party, and ended up leaving his bride to be at the altar because he was in the throes of conversion into vampirehood, or whatever
right,
you want to
right,
call
right.
it. And I called him Jace, Jace.
Hmm.
And then when I was writing Jeepers Reapers, I was just like, oh my, I'm not sorry, not Jeepers Reapers. The Siren's Mate, the character's name was Jason, but his nickname was Jace. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do that. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And then I thought, all right, let me just spell it differently. Let me spell it differently,
Well,
and maybe it'll
at
work. So
least you
instead of
were able
Jace,
to do that. I have in Girl on Fire, I have a character named Annabelle. In the next book, in Where You Left Me, I have a character named Annabelle. What am I doing?
you
They
must have
even
really
spell
liked
the
that
same.
name.
No, I'm pulling names out of a hat, and I'm not keeping a log of names I've used before, thinking I'm going to remember. Now, granted, these are both side characters, they're not main characters, but still, it's not the same person.
No. The other rule of thumb is that, if you have a character that has like a hard C, like a Caroline or a Karen or
Yeah.
something like that, that you shouldn't have a Carl, or you shouldn't have another character that has a hard C
Yeah.
or an L name. You have to kind of use the alphabet, because it's confusing to readers.
It
It really
is.
is. It's confusing to
And
read.
it's not even necessarily
So,
a hard sound. Even if it starts with the same letter, I can
yeah.
get confused. And I've
Yes.
done it myself in What Moons Do. I named Jonathan and Josh. Granted, they were twins, so I could sort of play it off. But it didn't even dawn on me that I had done it until
Yep.
I'm sending out arcs and going, oh my God, they have very similar names.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
I mean, twins, you can get away with that.
Yeah,
So
that was my that was my rationale too. It's like, yeah, I totally did that on purpose. I am the worst with names. I use a baby book and I grab a baby book and I what I really should do is one day just highlight all the names in the baby book that I've used so I know not to use them again. But that takes time to do. And when I've got 18 books and I know you've got more than that, it
mhm.
takes time to do that. And, when you're trying to work on deadlines and stuff, that's the sort of stuff that says you get to one day and it ain't
So
easy.
how do you manage to take care of your when you have an ongoing story? Like you just have your third book that just came
Yeah.
out in your
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's about, yeah, yeah.
in
Well,
your bride series,
yes,
right? It's
it's
where you
a
left me
fake
series.
a fake marriage sort of situation that turns out to be, whew, they kind of dig each other even though they're fake married to each other, and where does it all go from there? um but yeah, I mean, so I'm writing a 5-part novella series, so not only do you have to sort of pay attention to the plot details of each book, you've got to make sure that those same details are carrying through, that the characters personality sort of remains the same. Of course, there's some character growth, so there might be some things that change, but that you're not suddenly changing, their name or their initials or, anything like that. You've got to keep track of that. But you also sort of have to keep
Mm-hmm.
track of the arc situation. How does the book change from book one to book five? What is that overarching thing? And so you do have to take a look at it before you begin, or at least I do, because I'm a linear thinker. I need to know, where does this character go throughout this whole 5-book series? What is the journey? And so I sort of look at an outline of an individual story, and then I take that outline and go, okay, what are the beats? Like, this is the catalyst. Book one is the catalyst of the entire series. Where's the midpoint of the entire series? What's the midpoint beat that's going to happen in these fives? And just sort of assign books sort of the big huge beats, so that each story, each book, is hitting that overarching line as well. It's a lot of details to keep track of, and so I keep it all in one book, and I had this one just happens to have 5 tabs in it, and so I've got all 5 volumes just right in here. Every book has a different, theme and hero information, and even though they're the same characters, their story is changing a little bit. They're learning new things about themselves, and so things are changing about them. So I have this beside me every time I sit down and write, so that I can just refer back uh to that, because without it, I'm lost and I'm making stuff up that might not really actually make sense.
Yeah, I mean, when this is where even the most diehard of pansters, like Sherry, is a diehard
Yeah,
panster.
yeah,
She's one. Sherry Hayes, one of our Mod Pod group here. Um, she's a diehard panster,
yeah.
and she even has to go back and do her review. But I have a quick question for
Mm,
you, because you have this overarching theme out plan for
yep,
all your books, based on hitting the different beats in
yep,
in the romance
yep.
genre. Because when you really think about it, even with all my world building and the paranormal, it's still under a romance umbrella.
Mhm, mhm.
So do you ask yourself questions about your characters and about your plot as you're going along, or does your outline cover all that? Because the reason I'm asking you is because I know I do that. If I've got my notebooks, and I've got myriad of them, I've got a plethora of them, I will be going around, I'll write a scene, and then I'll, or that scene will turn into a chapter, and that chapter will turn into 2 chapters, and I've been writing things out longhand when sitting in front of the computer watching my cursor blink is just something that is just frustrating. I'll go and I'll change place. I'll go sit out in the grass, and I don't
Sure.
want to take my laptop with me anyway. But I will ask myself questions. Okay, what is the catalyst here? What is the impetus for this character to do this? What does he, she, or they want to get out of this? What is the end result? What is the conflict? The minor conflict and the major conflict that they're going to, what's hitting now? And these are like, I mean, these are just ones I'm throwing off the top of my head now, and obviously they're much more story pertinent when I'm actually in the middle of writing a story. They'll be much more concentrated in terms of the questions that I ask. They won't be so ambiguous. But I do that. I will ask myself questions so that they'll make me have to think.
Yeah.
And actually sometimes I've actually done flow charts where it's like, okay, if I have them do this, this is the domino effect of this, and then I'm like, no, I don't like that. So then you have to take it's almost like trying to plan out on a map where you want your, the different pathways, the different roads your character can take to get to point A, or from point A to point B. So
Yeah.
do you do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, and it's I do, and I think it's easy to meander too. I do rely heavily on an outline, at least for beat points. There'll be certain beats that I follow, and it'll be like, okay, well,
Do you want to explain
we're
to
now
our
approaching the dark night of the soul. This is going to be the part where, the hero does, sinks down into themselves and has a really dark moment, and everything is their fault, and that sort of thing. And I might not know exactly what they're going to do. I just know that they need to hit that beat there. So I might have written down something, and then as I'm writing it, go, you know what? This doesn't feel like now that I've been in it a minute, this doesn't feel like what they would do. I'm going to change it up. I'm still going to make sure I'm following sort of the structure of this beat, but we're going to go at it a different way. But I think the question that I ask myself the most, especially with the 5-part series, is this speaking to the theme at all? Is whatever's happening scene wise, does it relate back to the theme that I've set up for the book? And if it doesn't, if it's way off base from it, then maybe that's not the scene that needs to be in the book right now. I'm trying to service the overall theme primarily. So that I think dictates more than other things, but I will rely heavily on my beat points, because I will meander and I will go off course, and I'll just let people go where they are. And then I don't have a story anymore. I pantsed several of my first novels that way. And that's probably why I don't like those novels as much, because they were so hard to sort of get back on track and to form a cohesive story, that I spent so much time editing and bringing it back in and trying to figure out what's going on. Once I've sort of figured out what my natural beats are as a storyteller, how I like to tell stories, it's made it a lot easier. And I still have to rely on my notebooks to tell me what comes next, because I don't inherently know yet. But I rely
Yeah.
on them to sort of say, oh, okay, this is the midpoint. These are the 3 things that need to happen at this point in the book. And so I lean heavily on that. I know some just right off the top of the head, and more props to you, but I lean heavily on my my journals to tell me what to do.
I think having a rough outline is probably a good way to kind of keep yourself anchored to the story, because even if it's not going the way that you want it to, that rough outline at least gives you a target to aim for,
Yeah,
regardless of
yeah,
how you get there. You know what I
right,
mean? You may have thought, okay, well, I'm going to take, highway J to get from point
right.
A to point B.
Sure,
And then you realize that you have to go through the mountains of Z to get there,
right,
and to give the story a little more zhuzh or what have you.
right.
Um, I think one of the things, you had asked me a question, a little bit back about losing sight of details, and regardless of your planning strategies and so forth. And I'm scatterbrained. I lose track of details all the time.
Oh, oh,
I, you
same.
know, and it's something that we were talking about at one point, the difference between arc teams and beta readers, and
Yeah,
you know the- and alpha readers and so forth. And this is one of the things that's really important about having them, is
Absolutely.
because if you are, especially if you're writing more than one book at a time, which you and I both do,
Yeah.
or if you're writing books one right after the other, like I just did, I just wrote 3 books from April 1st until June 18th.
Yeah.
3 books done.
It
Boom,
gets
done.
messy
And not
in
little
here.
books either,
It gets very
Yeah.
messy.
Yes, it does. It gets messy up in the brain, and the brain meets. So that's what, you lose track of where, and more importantly is, if there's so much going on inside your head, you're going to have crossover whether you want it or
Oh, yeah.
not. So
Oh,
this isn't
absolutely.
something like, where you're like, oh my God, that book was in first person and now I'm writing in third person. So why
Oh,
are my
that's the
tenses all
worst.
messed up?
That's the worst.
And no, that's not her name. That's not her name. Her name is not
Exactly.
Zoe. Zoe
And
was from Siren's
that's
Fate.
not her fatal flaw, you idiots. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's, losing sight of details in your
Yeah.
story. It doesn't make you a bad writer. It just
No.
makes you uber creative, because that's what we do. There's
Yeah.
so many voices in our heads
Yeah.
that sometimes the voices become susurrant, and they just kind of they multi-layer one on top of the other. So
Yeah.
sometimes they blend.
Especially if you're working multiple projects at once.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. Like I know with the Where You Left Me series, the 5 of them, I before I even had started writing the second the draft of the second one, I was still drafting the first one, but I was like, I need to know roughly what's going to happen in each of these books so that I know how to write to the end of it. I can't just say, oh, I'm going to write 5 books and then not know how it's going to end. So before I even got too far in this, I wrote like a 1-page, like, okay, book 1 is, the fake wedding. Book 2 is the fake honeymoon. Book 3 is they're done from their honeymoon. They're back in reality, and just so that I could wrap my head around what was going to happen. And then I could go back and outline and really go into the details of like, all right, they're off from their honeymoon. Now what's going to happen in this book? And writing all that down helps my creative
I think it's
process.
great. I think it's terrific that you've got that kind of, fleshed out, because I haven't done that with the Jeepers Reapers series, with the, actually it's not the Jeepers Reapers series. It's the There Goes My Midlife Crisis series, Jeepers Reapers, and Where'd You Get That Keeper? And I actually had a reader contact me, because they finished book 1 and book 2, and on Facebook they messaged me, they put a comment on a post to saying more, and I was like, okay, and I was like, what do I do now? It's like I haven't thought about it, because I had really just it to be a duet, and then I was going to go into writing finish writing my cozies, and then have maybe a little bit of overlap between the two, and so I don't know what I'm going to do.
I have a worksheet, a 1-page worksheet that might help you figure out what maybe comes next.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is what happens when you decide, hey, I think I'll write in this journey,
well, and that happens
this
too.
genre, and not really plan out what you want to do.
You
say, I got an idea for a book,
for a duet, and you were done. And sometimes the readers are like, they want more. So your plan that you had can go out the window if there's enough reader demand for it. If it's like just one person asking for more, I'm not going to rearrange my whole life for you. But if you're getting a lot of people saying it, be like, okay, all right, I've got to find time and space and energy to get this into the schedule and figure out how to do it. So we authors absolutely pay attention to what reviews are saying, what readers are saying. We're watching that stuff to know what you want more of, what you want less of. We're paying attention to that.
Yes, so, we are.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, manically so.
Right. Now, we talked a little bit about the details that we hold on to. What sort of details specifically are you holding on to? Like, obviously, there's character stuff, specific character stuff. But what else are you sort of keeping track of when you're doing all of your
well, there's the mechanics too. If book 1 is, say for argument's sake, 60,000 words, book 2 can't be half the size.
Right.
You have to plan out the word count.
Right.
You have to, and planning out a word count, especially if you're used to writing longer novellas, which are usually between, I want to say between 30 and 40,000 words. If you're writing now, you're writing a full novel, which is 60,000 words plus, I believe.
Yeah, it depends on the genre, but yeah.
Yeah. um you have to kind of spread out the action. You have to spread out the arc of the story. And if you've been training yourself to write these longer novellas just to kind of whatever reason, it's for rapid release or just because that's all there is, folks,
Right.
that's all they wrote. um eh, you have to actually plan those beats better. And I think maybe we should tell, I mean, for people who are listening, and because we keep using the word beats, what exactly is a beat?
Well, a beat is like things that are happening in the story, the moments that are happening in the story, that almost like a scene in a movie, the moments that are happening in between the cuts, the how the action is sort of laying out.
Pace.
Yeah,
Pace.
yeah, pace, and yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Are you paying attention to like things like location? Do you have like a place where you keep like a digital collection of, landscapes or whatever? I mean, I would imagine that's probably something one would have to do in paranormal, but maybe you have a vivid imagination and you don't need that sort of visual
Well, to
inspiration.
tell you the truth, in the past, and I've just actually stopped doing this, I used to use places that I've known and I've visited, real life places, so
Hmm.
that if my readers would ever come to New York or to the environs around, or any of the other places where I've gone when I've taken my characters to, whether it's Italy or Spain or
Right.
the Middle East or what have you, it's places that I've been that they could say, oh my God, I remember this from this story. This is a real place. Um, I've gotten away from doing that only because I end up getting lost in my research and I lose valuable writing time because
Oh,
I
I
get
believe it.
lost in doing my research.
I believe
And
it.
I find myself sometimes going down a rabbit hole with minutia about things that are real. So it's easier for me to create my own places, create my own towns, create my own state parks and so forth,
Right.
because it makes it so that if I get something wrong, because I'm using creative license, that I'm not going to
Right.
have
Right.
somebody come and say, I live 5 miles from there
Right.
and that's not how that looks.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I haven't been there in 10 years and things have changed,
Right.
so it's like, even though I've been there, so I've learned to not use
Yeah. Oh, oh, same.
places.
Same. Or I'm very
Places,
vague
exact
with
places.
descriptions. There's a vague, resemblance to, but yeah, because readers are quick to point out if you get any of the details wrong. So if I'm nice and vague, I'm sort of describing any town USA versus a
So
specific place.
there are some places that I can't do that with, like with my legend series, because it takes place. It's the urban legends and
Right.
the historic legends that happen around Sleepy Hollow and Sleepy Hollow Country. So those places I cannot fudge, you
Right.
know. But those places are actually my stomping grounds, so I can actually go there and check and make sure. But I mean, it's like, since the pandemic, I mean, I wrote Hollow's End in 2012, and there was a French bistro with amazing coffee and French pastries right on the main street in Pleasantville, New York, and it is called JJ's. Well, Jean Jacques, and then we did call it JJ's. I don't know if it's still there anymore because of the pandemic. It may have
Right.
gone out of business,
Who
but
knows?
when I wrote the book, it was still there.
Right.
So
Right.
now it's an homage to that place with their raspberry coffee that I loved so much. So
All right. So I'm going to ask, I think, one sort of final question for us before we wrap up. What are some things that you wished you had kept note of and didn't? Help a fellow author out that's just starting maybe their book journey. What things should they be paying attention to? Do you need a minute to think about it? Because I have
no, because there's so
there's
many. So you
there
go
is
ahead.
so much. There is
Yeah.
so much. I was gonna say, for my personally, obviously names, if you can
Yes.
keep track of names, do that early and do that often. But for me, time. Where am I in time and space? That seems to be so now I actually add it to my outline, like what day is it? What time of day is it? So that for every chapter I know what day am I on? Is it night? Is it day? I lose track of time bigly.
Temporal things are important, but for me, in the just recent past and recent books, it has to do because these were Siren's Mate was book 3, and Where'd You Get That Keeper was book 2, so, and it was The Witch's Star was book 3 in that series, Robin Peterman's Magic and Mayhem. It was where we were in the calendar,
Yes.
because they, where is it? Is it
Yes.
summer? Is it fall?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Have to take care. Where are we?
Yes. Yes.
There are other things, there are other things that are more important in terms of character and what they things that happened in their past that and people that they liked. What happened to those people in their life? Did they just fall off the face of the planet? You have to remember that secondary and tertiary characters, if you introduce them in one book, you have to explain where they went if they're never mentioned again in the next books. You know what I mean? Even if it's just a couple of lines, so secondary and tertiary characters, but time is definitely a big one. Where we are in the week, if I say something is going to take a week, well, where are we? Are we on a Tuesday or are we on a Friday? How many days have passed?
Exactly. Yeah.
And time of year.
In my young adult book, What Moons Do, it was heavily the phases of the moon were things that were taking place in the story were directly corresponding with the phases of the moon. So I needed to make sure I picked a year in which the phases of the moon matched what I was writing. So I had to literally look at lunar cycles and go, okay, so it's a full moon on this chapter, and I said it was going to be on a Friday, and so I had to sort of pick a day in a month based on a lunar cycle, and it was maddening. It was maddening trying to figure
I can imagine
work it backwards, but I did it.
Yeah. Like in The Witch's Star, I had said that it was a crescent moon. And then at one point later on in the book, I said full moon. And I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
No. Like this 2 weeks have not gone by.
It's the stuff like that you don't even think about. You're like, oh, on a pretty full moon for this night. Can you, with the timeline that you've given, actually have a full moon? Maybe.
Nope.
Maybe not.
And is the crescent moon a waxing crescent or is it a waning crescent?
Exactly. I learned so much about moons for that book that I'm still wearing the Faces of the Moon necklace because I learned much more about the phases of the moon than I ever did in school writing this stupid book.
And if you're going to quote your stories, if you're going to use them for promo or anything, like I'm just doing it now because in Hollow's End, my character, the grandmother, everybody calls her Gran. She's she's a very powerful witch, and she wears these 2 rings that are very, very ornate, and they're like her trademark. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, was it a moonstone or was it an opal? I wrote this book 10 years ago. I don't remember. I've got to go and look it up because I decided I was going to do something with it because it's in a clawed, setting,
little
ring
details
setting.
Like that
and I was like, okay,
you're never going to have to think about again, and suddenly,
nope. So anyway, know yo shit.
That's know yo shit and write it down. Write it down.
Yes, know
either
yo
in
shit.
a paper or a digital format, because you will not remember it. That is our advice today on keeping track of the details. That we're out of time for today, but we hope that you join us next week on Bound by Books. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Wait! Before you go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check us out on our website, boundbybookspodcast.com.